It's expensive to get old. Like, really expensive. A semi-private nursing home room is around $9,277. A private nursing home room is approximately $10,646, and an assisted living facility is about $5,900. Oh, and those prices, they're per month. Not per year, per quarter, but per month. That is, of course, a lot of damn money, especially at a time where if you're needing this long-term care, you're likely on a fixed income of some kind. This is where government programs come in to help cover the cost of this long-term care, primarily federal Medicaid. Generally, the way it works is that the feds allocate Medicaid money to each of the states, and then each state implements Medicaid for their citizens. Some just simply use the federal standards and don't bother to even change the name. Other states, like California, have their own standards on how they run the state's Medicaid program. We even have a cute little California name for it, Medi-cal. Medi-cal is Medicaid for California. It offers free or low-cost healthcare coverage to people who qualify. Medi-cal pays for doctor's visits, dental care, eye checkups, and a lot more. It also covers services that keep you healthy. If you live in California and you meet the qualifications, you may be able to get Medi-cal. However, there are major changes for Medi-cal in California for 2026. My God, we're already halfway through October at the time of filming this. And if you're thinking that you might need to use Medi-cal to pay for long-term care, you might want to apply now before the 2026 changes take effect. Let's talk about those changes for 2026, as well as the Medi-cal recovery claim that's been an ever-present scare. But be sure to hit the like button, subscribe so you can stay up to date as these rules are constantly changing at the last second. But as always, thank you very much for watching. We've talked about Medi-cal before on this channel, but it's been a long time. And that's because as of January 1st, 2024, California essentially opened up the floodgates and allowed anybody to be able to apply and qualify for Medi-cal. And that applied for 2024 and is still in place as of right now. Now, when I say open up the floodgates, I mean previously there were asset limits on what you could have in order to just qualify for Medi-cal in the first place. As of January 1st, 2024, they did away with those asset requirements. Didn't matter if you had $1 or $1 million in the bank, you could apply and qualify for Medi-cal. Since then, we haven't had to do much complicated planning around applying and qualifying for Medi-cal because there was just no need. Now, there is still the Medi-cal recovery claim there, which I'll talk about in a moment, but we didn't have to move assets around anymore. Really, the only thing they cared about is what your income was. And even then, that didn't inhibit your ability to qualify. That just determined how much you pay out of pocket before Medi-cal would come in and cover the rest. Kind of like a deductible, but they call it a share of cost. However, evidently, opening up floodgates is not a great idea for a state's budget, and so it's time to try to close those gates just a bit, or try to put them back almost to where they were before. What that means is California is now going back to being more restrictive on who can qualify for Medi-cal going forward. As of this point, we don't know the full figures, and this often depends on what sort of long-term care you're looking for, but it's looking like around $130,000 for individuals and $195,000 for married couple. Those are now your new asset limits in order to qualify for Medi-cal. That means it's back to complicated planning and moving assets in a careful, delicate way so as to allow for estates to be preserved while avoiding a recovery claim against one's estate after the fact. Now, just in case you're not quite sure what I'm talking about when I say recovery claim, what it is the state trying to recoup some of its cost it paid for your care while you were alive after you die. So essentially, the state of California becomes a creditor to your estate to try to recoup some of that long-term care cost. And where they collect that money from, of course, is your estate, which most of the time means out of the family home. Now, this recovery claim has been something that's been in place for a long time, even before 2024. And the way we've always avoided it is pretty simple. We create a trust. We avoid probate. So long as your estate avoids probate after you pass, then the state of California cannot become a creditor to your estate. So that made the initial planning kind of easy. No matter what, we need to be creating a trust in order to avoid any sort of Medi-cal recovery claim, and creating a trust is something you should have been doing anyway. Now that it looks like we're going to have those asset limits in place again for 2026, asset movement must be done carefully through gift stacking if we have more assets on hand than what would allow us to qualify. By gift stacking, I mean we move a certain amount of money or assets out of your estate per day so as not to trigger a period of ineligibility. As long as we move it out under certain limits provided by Medi-cal, we're not doing anything shady here, then we can turn around, qualify for Medi-cal once we know our estate now is below the limits. Medi-cal wants to know how we move the money or the assets out, and as long as we did it in the right way, then we can go ahead and qualify. Again, in 2024 and 2025, we didn't have to do any of this, which meant a lot less planning, a lot less work needed to go in before applying to Medi-cal in the first place. We still needed a trust, but again, that was something you should have been doing anyway, so no careful, complicated, or special planning. But now that we're going back to having asset limits, careful planning is back on the menu, which means oftentimes involving special needs trusts and other trusted family members to help us move assets around. All of that is now back on the menu. However, on a side note, the IRS also closed a loophole regarding step-up and basis for irrevocable trusts, like special needs trusts, meaning we'll have to be much more careful when designing your estate plan starting next year. Now again, all of this is in flux, so we'll be bringing you more information as we learn more. They always wait until the last second to publish full guidance, so chances are we'll be back here with another video to discuss what we know going into 2026 with more clarity. However, what it's looking like is while we are still currently under the unlimited asset period, at least until the end of 2025, it does take a long time for your application to go through and get approved for Medi-cal. So what if you apply before the end of the year going into 2026 and not get approved until 2026? Well, what it's looking like is so long as you apply in 2025, then it doesn't matter what assets you have. Or actually, to clarify, they still care what assets you have, and you will have to conform to the asset limits of 2026, but there will not be any look-back period. So you can move all the assets out all in one go as long as you applied in 2025. If you apply in 2026, then Medi-cal has a look-back period, and it's 30 months, 2.5 years. They want to see what you've done with your assets over the past 30 months before applying. Essentially, if you moved money too quickly or in too large of a bulk, then that creates a period of months or even more, depending on how much you moved, to where you cannot qualify for Medi-cal. So maybe you submit the application, they find out you've got 3 months of non-conforming asset movement. Well, that's 3 months you have to wait before you can then turn around and qualify, on top of the already long and drawn out application process and approval process in the first place. So all that means is right now, even though the rules are a little bit in flux and they can change, if we apply during 2025, as long as we're able to move assets out of your estate before we go into 2026 and therefore fall under those 2026 rules, then doesn't matter how you did it, you just need to get it out of there. But going into 2026, if you apply that year, you need to move it out in their prescribed way. Oh, and for those of you currently on Medi-cal, even if you got Medi-cal last year or this year during the unlimited asset period, your estate will have to conform to the new asset requirements when you do your renewal for 2026. Meaning these asset limits apply to everybody, whether they be new applicants or somebody just renewing their Medi-cal. You need to conform to these standards. It's just how you do it is the secret sauce, so to speak. But with that, what do you think of California going back to being more restrictive for Medi-cal? It's probably a good way to shore up a budget, but it does create a big panic and scare for everybody in the state who's looking like they need long-term care. Now, I know I was a little bit light on details, but that's because we just don't know all the details yet. But as we learn more, like I said, we'll keep you updated. So be sure to like and subscribe so you stay up to date for all that. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below, or you can always call my office. I'm attorney Andrew Bethel, and I'll see you at our next meeting.